First of all, thank you all so much for spending your Saturday afternoon with us. I greatly appreciate the opportunity. My name is Jordan Sutliff. I am one of many college counselors, or part of the college counseling team here at Excel Academy, and I will be your MC for the evening, or afternoon, as it were. And we'll go ahead and get started. So we have a wonderful list of topics that we would like to discuss with you related to all aspects of the college counseling process. There will be a Q&A section at the very end. So if you would like, you're welcome to write down notes, write down questions you may have for us to save to the very end, and we'll be sure to address all of them for you. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and we'll get started. So first, I would like to first congratulate our recent students over the past 2 application cycles. We've had some tremendous results. We've had, as you can see here, a list of our college acceptances and college, those students being admitted to top-tier colleges, Ivy League, public, private, UC, you name it. We have a wide diversity of students getting into the colleges of their dreams. And we're happy to say that we enjoy helping these students find these successful colleges and find the chance to be able to attend the colleges of their dreams. And we have a wide variety of talented students who come to us and end up in places like this. So if you're ever interested in applying to any of these colleges or ever interested in working with us, we have had a proven track record of success, and we're happy to continue that going forward for this upcoming application cycle. Next up, I'd like to briefly just introduce you all to our college counseling team. This is the list of names, of course, of those who are involved with our college counseling team, who will assist you as college counselors, will assist you in more administrative aspects, making sure that you're meeting those deadlines, making sure that your essay topics have been selected and your list of colleges have been selected. And so we all work together in a very collaborative process, making sure that everybody, each individual student of ours, is meeting their goals, meeting their deadlines, and ultimately providing the best application going forward in order to achieve this. And as you can see, as you go through our list of names here, not only do we have people with experience counseling in high school, counseling in college, being admissions counselors, but also those with a proven track record and many, many years of experience doing independent college counseling. So regardless of whatever help or assistance you may need, we have a wide variety and also a sheer amount of experience that we will be able to use and utilize as we assist you with your college applications this application cycle. So without further ado, I'd like to transition it over to Mr. Keeman, who will speak a bit about just the general process, of course, but also kind of speak about how to stand out from the crowd and also just your options when first thinking about deciding to apply for college. So Mr. Keeman, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Okay, thank you for attending our webinar, and let's get this going. So I wanted to begin by discussing all the different possible admissions options because a lot of parents and students wonder about early decision, early action, and different admissions policies. So we're going to begin with early decision, which is binding. And that means that if you apply early decision and you get in, then you must go. And that's what early decision is. And those tend to be due November 1st. All of the early tend to be due November 1st. And then there's early action, and that's non-binding. So you find the decision, your results early. Usually the decisions come out December 15th if you apply early. So you apply by November 1st, and then your results come out December 15th, even before the regular applications are due. So if you can get into your early, you're sort of off the hook. You don't have to worry about college anymore. And you find out by December 15th, where everyone else who's applied regular has to wait until April. So that's a pretty long wait of worrying and stress. So early is a pretty good option. So as I was saying, early decision is binding. You have to go. Early action, once you get in, you do have the right to change your mind and not go. And so that's the difference between early decision and early action. But statistics have shown that early decision does give you a percentage boost to your chances. And then the UCs are due November 30th. They have their own application, whereas the private colleges tend to use something like the Common App or the Coalition App, and USC uses that as well. And then the UCs have their own application, and the UCs are due November 30th. And USC, if you want to apply for merit scholarship, that is due December 1st. And then the regular private colleges tend to be due early January. And then there is this one new option called Early Decision 2, which is also binding, and those tend to be due early February. If you still decided, like after applying regular, that there is this one college you really, really want to go to more than anyone else, anywhere else, then there is this Early Decision 2 option for some colleges. And that also gives you a little bit of a chance, because Early Decision 2 is basically showing that you're my number one. I really, really want to go to your college, and colleges like that. So when they accept you, you're sort of making this kind of deal. So you're going to, in exchange for this little extra consideration, you promise that you will attend. And that's Early Decision. Okay, next slide.
Perfect. Sure.
And I'll answer more questions about that later on in the Q&A if you guys want to know more details about early action or early decision. And now, basically, we need to talk about the college admissions process. It's become far more competitive. Every year, we're breaking records for competitiveness. And the last 2 years, because of COVID, a lot of colleges have decided to go test optional. And that's caused a lot of problems, because more and more students who normally would not have applied to colleges now are applying, because they no longer have to submit their SAT or test score. So there's now a pathway for them to apply to some of these more selective colleges. And so like applications have increased by 60%, but the number of spots available are still the same. So the acceptance rates have gone down, and it's just very, very difficult now. And I made a note, and because a lot of those students are applying to those top 20, top 30, top 40 colleges, they've seen a noticeable increase in the number of applicants. But in the same token, like the lesser known colleges actually saw a reduction in the number of applications, meaning that there's more open spots there. So I guess the big lesson here is that don't necessarily just assume that like you want to apply to those fancy name known colleges and that's like the end goal, because the truth is that even colleges that aren't as fancy will still offer you really good education, really good opportunities on par with the Ivy Leagues. And, you should not just ignore those just because they're not as shiny, because a lot of those kind of colleges, they offer the same quality of education, same success rates. They just don't come with that shiny brand name. So that's something to keep in mind, to like keep your options open, and don't just think like I have to apply to Ivy Leagues, I have to apply to Northwestern, Duke, Chicago, or somehow like I'm not going to be viewed as highly or anything like that. In America, it just doesn't work that way. Colleges just respect more experience and just any good solid college degree, and that's the most important thing. And then like because it's so competitive, there's a case where you could do your best, you could work your hardest to get straight A's, perfect SAT score, do everything possible and all your effort, and you might not get in because of bad luck. And I know that's kind of it's kind of hard to say that, because you'd like to think that the reward is proportional to your effort. So if you worked your hardest, you got straight A's, you got good SATs, and you did all your activities and blah blah blah, then you deserve to get into a better college. But there's just so much competition that it could really come down to like a flip of a coin. Like perhaps if a college happened to need a good violin player because they graduated some violin players, and you have two students who are both excellent, and one's excellent at trumpet and the other's excellent at the violin, it could be the difference if just that instrument you happen to be excellent in could be the difference maker. And there's nothing you could have done to change that, because we can't know what the colleges are going to be missing or looking for. So that would mean that it's luck. You could have done everything, and in a different year, you would have gotten in. Last year, maybe you would have gotten in. Next year, you might have gotten in. But this particular year, and when you're applying to, let's say, like Columbia, this particular year for Columbia applicants, you just happened to be part of a group that was overrepresented. And because of that, you didn't get in, not because you didn't deserve to get in, but just because the cards weren't in your favor for this particular application cycle. That's something to keep in mind. And then I also want to talk about yield rates. And I know a lot of us talk about acceptance rates and college rankings, But actually, when top colleges, when they compare to each other and they try to see like which colleges, like when Princeton is checking out Harvard or Harvard is checking out Yale or Yale is checking out USC, and the top colleges are sort of like gauging each other, they actually look at something called yield rate. And yield rate is actually the number of students who choose to go to that college once they're accepted. So for example, Stanford and Harvard have the highest yield rates at over 80%. They're around 82%. So that means at about 80% of the students who get into Harvard or Stanford choose to go there. The strange thing is if you look at certain colleges that are also considered like really popular, such as Duke or even Dartmouth or Brown or Cornell, you'll notice that their yield rates are a little bit lower. They might be in the 60s or low 70s. That means that a lot of students who apply to both of those colleges, if they might get into like Columbia or they might get into like UPenn or Chicago, but they also get into Harvard or Stanford and they always just choose to go there instead. And so then the colleges start losing these students. And that's important because, can you go to the next slide, Jordan?
Sure.
And that's important because if you're picking a college to apply to your early decision, which is important because every student sort of has that one early decision, which is like their super ace card. It's their main way to show the colleges that this is the college for me. So a lot of students may choose, oh, I want to do early decision to Stanford or single choice early action to like, Stanford or Harvard or schools like that. But you may want to think about that because if your decision to apply to Harvard or Stanford is because Harvard or Stanford is so famous and shiny and you can brag about it and your parents can brag about it, if that's your main goal, you may want to reconsider that because if you choose to apply early decision to a college that's, let's say like Princeton, for example, Princeton has a lower yield rate than Harvard and Stanford, which means Princeton is aware that when they accept students, there's a chance that those students will choose Harvard or Stanford over them. So there's more incentive for them to want to accept a student who applies early to them and lock that student in. So if you're okay with Chicago or Chicago actually is a high yield rate, but if you're okay with Duke or if you're okay with, let's say, Cornell, and you'd happily go to Cornell even if it's not Harvard, then you may want to consider applying to that college early decision. So your numbers are going to be good enough for Harvard and Princeton. So then if you apply to Cornell early, they're going to be like, oh, this student may go to Harvard or Stanford, but they chose to apply to us early. Let's take him. They've shown that they really love us. So let's try to lock him in and give them scholarship offers so that they don't change their mind and, later on. So that's something you need to consider that, if you think that like other colleges that aren't Harvard and Stanford, even some of the other Ivy Leagues, that you're okay with going to those colleges, you may want to consider applying early to those colleges instead. And if you don't get in there, you can still apply regular to Harvard or Stanford. But yield rate is something to keep in mind. And that's something we can talk about more in detail when you actually have college counseling sessions with us. We'll use that as a factor to help you pick your colleges. And then therefore, the final note is that's why, because it's so competitive, basically what the top colleges do is they have this ideal idea of what they want their student body to look like ahead of time. They have it sort of divided into kind of like majors and, like things like socioeconomic status, your race, your state that you come from, the socioeconomic situation of the school you attend. There's all these different factors that go into building this student body that each college is looking for. So your goal is basically to you want to try to fit what that college is looking for, and the way to do that is through your main essay, through recommendation letters, and then through your activities. You need to sort of demonstrate that one, that the college you're applying to is number one, the college you love the most, and you have to prove that to the colleges through demonstrated interest. So if you just talk about how great you are and they see your great GPA, they see your great SAT, and they see all of this stuff, they'll know that you're a great student who deserves to go to their college, but you're also good enough to get into other colleges as well. So why should they pick you if you don't show any evidence that the college that you're applying is the one that you truly love? So that's where you need to do some research. You need to show demonstrated interest, go take for virtual tours where you sign up at the colleges. Start looking for college clubs that you're interested in and adding them on Instagram or Snapchat, because colleges will check your social media. And if they see that a lot of the organizations you're following belong to, let's say, UPenn, then UPenn, you're going to be able to show UPenn that you've done your research and you love UPenn more than even Harvard or Stanford. And you know professors at UPenn, you know what UPenn's sort of culture is, you know what they specialize in, you know what their mission is. And you need to prove to them that you really, really want to go to UPenn through your supplementary essays. And then in your essays, you want to highlight soft skills. That's something that colleges look for too, because they already know your hard skills. They can see your GPA, your SAT, your class ranking, your AP classes, even your activities. They can see that from your list. So you really want, in your like supplementary essays, you kind of want to show them your ability to like communicate, critical problem solving, your imagination, your ability to cooperate with others. And you need to show those traits in your essays by providing examples throughout your essays that show your ability to problem solve, your ability to be creative and work in teams. And that's actually more important to colleges, because every student who applies to those colleges will all have straight A's and will all have good SATs, will all have good activities and all of that. So that's really hard to separate yourself through those. So you really got to show your personality, and you really got to show your soft skills, your leadership, communication, critical thinking. And again, we'll help your student develop that as part of sort of the profile we create for the brand of the student, to try to see what the student's strengths are and how we can communicate that through the essays. And therefore, that's why the most important thing right now is your uniqueness, your individuality, and your personality. And that's why the essays and interviews and recommendations are even more important than ever before, because now you're competing with students without SAT scores. So the essays are now have become the main way to really show who you are. And therefore, we have a lot of essay experts. So I'm going to turn it over to Jordan, who's going to go ahead and talk about how to make your essay pop and stand out. And if you have any other questions about this, there will be a Q&A, and I'll answer specific questions then. Okay, so
perfect.
To you, Jordan.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm simply one of many, many experts here. College counselors here are going to assist you with essays. But I'd like to at least give you some general advice as you maybe perhaps begin brainstorming your topics, and kind of just think about what story, what memory of your life, what kind of essay you would like to construct in order to kind of essentially appeal to the admissions committee. As Mr. Keeman kind of indicated earlier, again, the fact that more and more schools are going test blind or test optional in terms of the SAT or the ACT means that all of the other aspects of the essay, or the college application rather, are going to be that much more important. The SAT and the ACT are becoming less of a factor, and everything else is becoming more emphasized. And that obviously includes your college essay. The main reason that we really kind of prioritize or emphasize the college essay during our consultations together is simply because, more than your transcripts, more than your test scores, more than all of that data, this is the chance to show off your personality. This is your chance to show off kind of who you are as a person. That also includes, your future aspirations, your future goals. That includes your personal history, the life, the experiences you've had that have led up to this moment. And that's simply all of those stories are simply things that are not going to be able to be represented properly in, your grades, your transcript, your SAT, ACT scores, etc. One big thing that we can kind of provide advice to you for is it's difficult to, in fact, it's impossible to say there is a magic formula for a college essay. I can't simply say, just write about your dog and you're getting in, simply because not everybody has the exact same life stories, has the exact same memories. Some people don't have dogs. And so I can't offer a sort of magic formula, as it were, or a topic that is going to guarantee success. However, what I can say is what I would start perhaps encouraging you to do is, rather than perhaps think about, again, kind of that writing an essay that maybe allows you to feel more like that cookie cutter model of like a perfect student, with the 4.0 and the kind of perfect A's and an amazing test score, et cetera, rather than focusing on kind of appealing towards that model of a perfect student, which many people will have the exact same grades and transcripts and test scores as you throughout the nation. Rather, I would suggest that you maybe focus more on what is something that I have, an experience I have, a memory that I have, a story that I have that nobody else has. Because this, again, is your best way to stand out from the crowd, to really indicate to yourself, like, or to your admissions committee, that your story is worth telling and your inclusion in college is worthy simply because you can offer something to your college that nobody else is able to offer, or you have stories that nobody else in that college is able to tell. And that's your best chance for the college essay. So rather than trying to sound like the perfect model of an essay writer or create a quote unquote perfect essay, it would be much better for you to start thinking, okay, what is a story that I know is only mine and mine alone? And that might be a good way to start brainstorming possible topics for your essay. So again, we can't necessarily give you, topics that we would highly encourage you to write about because we simply don't know, your stories yet. We don't know your lives yet. So one of the big things that we do when we first work with students is we sit down and almost kind of have like a sort of interview, sort of therapy session of, what are some powerful experiences in your life? Like, what are your interests? What do you want to do in the future? Just kind of run the full gamut so that we get not only a better understanding of who you are as a student, which obviously will help us with all aspects of the college counseling process, but also to see, there have been many times, for example, when I've sat down with an interviewer, I've assisted Mr. Keeman with an interview, and they'll say this one thing and we're immediately like, that's it. That's the thing that's going to set you apart for the college essay. That's the memory that is really powerful that I think we should explore more. And so that's kind of the process that we begin with. And that's something that we can do if you decide to sign up for our college counseling services with us. However, while I can't necessarily give you a indication of, the tried and true perfect topic for you to write about, I can definitely tell you the ones that are more popular to the point of perhaps being a little cliche. And those might be things that certain topics that you might want to avoid. I want to say before we begin that it's not necessarily that these are forbidden. Like, it's not that these are like 100%. We are banning you from writing topics related to these 3 or 4 particular topics. It's just more of, we see dozens upon hundreds of essays that like address these topics. And again, if the purpose is for you to stand out, to introduce yourself as an individual, it's going to be much harder for you to distinguish yourself and stand out if you write about a topic that everybody else is going to write about. So that's why I'm presenting these topics to you as perhaps things of being a little skeptical or wary about approaching an essay that addresses these topics. So I'll just run through these real quick. So the first one is what we call like the state championship essay, which is essentially like, me and my basketball team won state, and I couldn't have done it without their hard work. And I learned about the value of teamwork and collaboration, and that like cheesy freeze frame, like holding up the trophy in your arms at the end of the sports movie, that kind of vibe. We see a lot of those. And again, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. Obviously, if you want to highlight an accomplishment, the 2 big things are, one, that accomplishment will probably be reflected elsewhere in like your transcript or your resume or somewhere else. So you don't want to repeat the same information over. And the second thing is also, if the purpose is to kind of highlight your individuality, it's going to be difficult to do so when you talk about your team as your main subject. Obviously, there are things that you can highlight, like your ability to collaborate with others, your ability to do teamwork. If you're like, for example, a basketball captain, you can highlight your leadership abilities. But at the end of the day, these essays tend to focus more on the team and less about the individual, the writer. And again, you're supposed to highlight what makes you unique yourself. And so it's going to be difficult to do that when you discuss mainly your team and the people around you. Same thing here. The personal tragedy essay, again, going back to the dog, is, you are a child and unfortunately maybe your dog passed away, or some other kind of difficult emotion or memory is brought up to the surface. And I want to be careful here and say, I'm not, these experiences can be hard. Grief can be hard. And obviously it can be very therapeutic and cathartic to write about these essays. The difficulty is that they tend to focus more on the memory of the past and fixate more on the memory of the past, and don't really address, how that experience, how that memory is going to help them moving forward. The lessons they've learned, the mission that they have going forward, the aspirations that they have because of this difficult memory. And instead, the essay is mainly just about the loss of a loved one, or another kind of difficult experience that doesn't really offer sort of a guide to moving forward or steps to moving forward. So that's kind of one where it can be easy to fall into certain traps or make certain mistakes when writing about that topic. Very briefly, pandemic essay. The main reason we suggest this, oh yeah, go ahead, Mr. Keeman, please.
I just wanted to just really quickly just say that, yeah, as Jordan is saying, like if you're going to talk about like a grandmother who died of cancer or something like some kind of a really something like that, like it's not necessarily that you just can't do it, but just make sure that it's really small element and it's more about how it's changed you and what you've done and different things that it's shifted the way you view life and how that's going to help you become a better person. You want to focus more on you and, like you said, like the future and about, I just want to make sure.
No, absolutely. Thank you. No, I appreciate that. So speaking of, with the pandemic essay, that's probably part of the reason we're suggesting that is probably because there might be an overlap in terms of, what happens with the personal tragedy essay. Again, a fixation on like, the negative experiences you had, a fixation on the difficult memories that you've experienced because of the pandemic. Again, it's probably going to be more worthwhile to talk about how this has affected you and is going to influence you going forward. The other reason is simply because, at least for the Common App, and I'm sure other applications will follow suit, they will already have an optional essay for you about the pandemic. They're repeating it again this year. They had one last year, they'll repeat it again this year. And it's simply a short answer essay that will allow you to address any particular experiences you might have had related to the pandemic, especially if it falls under, for example, if your GPA slipped, understandably, or if other kind of unseen factors affected your schoolwork or your other aspects of your college application. That pandemic optional essay will be a chance for you to kind of explain, your experience and also what might have affected other aspects of your college application. So probably not worthwhile to talk about it in your main essay when you already have an optional essay about the pandemic going forward. And then the final thing is, so the Common App is basically recycling and repeating all of the same topics from last year, and they're using them this year. The only thing is that there's one major change, and it's that prompt down below. All the other prompts are going to stay the same. It's just the final optional essay is going to be, or one of the essay prompts, I should say, for your main essay in the Common App is reflect on something that someone has done for you that has made you happy or thankful in a surprising way. How has this gratitude affected or motivated you? And while I can't obviously read the minds of the people who chose these particular prompts for the Common App, I expect that they chose this for students to instead highlight more positive experiences or positive emotions of gratitude, of thankfulness, of volunteering, of contributing and giving back to your community. And that might be a good indication. The fact that they've kept everything else the same, they just really want to highlight and they really want to change and perhaps focus instead on one more prompt that allows students to talk more about their gratitude and their happiness. So again, these are not necessarily going to be, banned topics. You're not forbidden from writing about these. Just know that these are very popular and very common, so it's going to be difficult to distinguish yourself going forward. Final thing, and I'll be super quick, is you have supplemental essays. These are typically short answer essays that will be attached to each particular university or college that you work for. A lot of people, or at least I have a lot of experience where students just forget to do these or forget to look these up until the last minute. And they are still very important because they do offer more chances for you, not only to highlight your personality, but also to highlight why you choose a particular college, what you want to do when you attend a particular college. So that can be really important. So don't forget to look those up for each college and make sure that you see if they do in fact assign supplemental essays. They can get a bit creative. The University of Chicago is kind of notorious for the really weird off-kilter essay topics. This one is about whether or not Olive Garden can actually give us unlimited breadsticks if there's only a limited amount of matter in the universe. So, something to think about. And then, however, the most common supplemental essay topic is going to be kind of essentially asking you, why are you choosing to attend, or why do you choose to apply to Boston University, for example, or Harvard or Princeton or Yale? And then also, why your particular major? And this is a great chance for you, as Mr. Keeman indicated, to show your demonstrated interest. So if you, for example, if you visited the campus, you could write about, specific landmarks that you saw on campus. If you attended maybe a particular class or you spoke with a particular professor, you could write about that. If there's a particular program or extracurricular activity that you'd like to attend that's at that college, that maybe only that college provides, that would be a great opportunity for you to write about that. So This is a great opportunity to show off your research, which I would highly suggest you start doing over the summer, including, for example, visiting campuses. Mr. Brandon recently shared an article with me that is saying that, this summer and fall, more and more universities are opening up their doors for actual campus visits. So if you have an itch to vacation somewhere, it might be a good chance to swing by a university campus of your choice if you so choose. So that'll be it for now. I will say that if you're still wondering about the essay topic process, we are going to be offering a workshop later for those who enroll in our college counseling services. It's only going to be given to those who actually sign up for college counseling. So if you're looking for a college essay workshop or a college essay webinar later, then this would be a great opportunity to sign up, and we can help you formulate the perfect essay topic for you, and help you get started with that writing process. So that's it for me for essays. We'll then transition over, I believe, to Mr. Derek, who's going to tell us a little bit more about the interviews, the resumes, and the recommendations. So Mr. Derek, whenever you're ready.
Hi there again. So I want to talk about extracurricular activities, but also in tangent with your resume. So when you go to high school, or in high school, there are probably any number of activities that are very exciting and interesting to you. And a lot of students will choose to join clubs simply because they think that it will make their resume or their college application look good. I'm going to suggest very strongly that you choose extracurricular activities that are of interest and display a passion that you have. Because when you go to apply to a college, the college application officers are very savvy on students who are doing resume packing and choosing activities that they believe the students think will get them into better colleges or into college in general. And when you have the time for your interview or writing your essay, then there's going to be a disconnect between the things that you've chosen for extracurriculars and the things about which you speak. And that's going to make you look, frankly, false. And you don't want to be false. You want to be very sincere, and you will be yourself, as I think both Mr. Jordan and Mr. Keeman have already emphasized very strongly. Who are you? And so the extracurricular activities that you choose should also reflect that. That said, once you become involved with a club or an activity, pursue leadership roles within those, because that shows your ability to be a leader, but also to work with other people, and that other people trust you in leadership positions. When you come to write your resume, keep in mind that it is not a repetition of your transcript. So you may indicate your GPA. You don't need to list courses that you've taken. You don't need to list classes you've taken, how well you've done in them. You may put your SAT scores down in them. But what you want to highlight are the various activities in which you've been involved. For example, ta-da. I had to switch my screen on my own computer here. So if you were involved in competitive sports, that was the kind of thing that should go in your resume. If your team did go to state championships, you would put it there. You don't want to write about it in your essay, because that is, again, as Mr. Jordan pointed out, that's about a team effort. But having it as one line on your resume is perfectly acceptable. Did you play an individual sport? Is there a difference between playing sports on a school level, an intramural level, or playing them competitively with other schools? And how well did you do? And what was your role specifically within that? Again, this is about you. So it's not just enough to say I was on the tennis team, or I was one of the members of the soccer team. What was your part in that? Were you involved in civic and community activities? Did you work on a political campaign? Did you actually run for office yourself? And you may think, I'm just a kid, I've run for office. Actually, one of my students 2 years ago actually ran for the homeowners association board in his condo building. And he was actually, looks like he was going to win, but a couple of people who didn't like his agenda did everything they could to thwart that. And they found out there was actually a law in the state that said because he was underage, he could not serve. But he actually attempted to run for an office. And he wasn't doing that to pack his resume. He was doing it because there were some issues, again, that were important to him in his condo building that other tenants had also expressed. Are you involved in an ethnic or cultural organization? And I think a lot of times people are afraid to talk about their involvement in their ethnicity or race-based organization. Don't forget, that is part of who you are. It is an inherent part of your experience, your personality, how you interface with the world. Don't hide that. Celebrate who you are. Similarly, students who may be LGBTQ or involved in a gay-straight alliance sometimes are unsure if they should put that on their resumes. Again, it shows something about you. It's part of celebrating the diversity that is our country, and colleges and universities are very much about celebrating that diversity. And I think particularly on this one, it also shows that you have taken pride in who you are, or that you view diversity as being important. If you are applying to a school in which you think that's going to hurt you, then that may not be the school for you. So that's something to think about as you're creating your resume. Am I leaving something off because I'm afraid that school won't let me in? Then you have to ask yourself, am I going to be comfortable in that school? Okay. If you're involved in a religious or faith-based activity, again, if it's something that was important to you, and you, particularly if you did something, then put it down. One of my students last year, through her school, was involved very intimately with her parish in deciding how funds would go to people in need. And the people who were on that list to be qualified for those funds came through the priest. And that was something in which she was involved for 3 years, and she was very actively involved in that. Again, that shows leadership. That shows that her faith was not just something that she did on a Sunday afternoon. It was an integral part of who she was. And indeed, one of the colleges that she applied to, actually two of the colleges to which she applied, that connection between self and faith was very important. Indeed, she got into one of those schools and it really was the right fit for her. But I think sometimes people are afraid to mention that. Again, your resume is a reflection of who you are, but make sure that what you're putting down, you're not just putting down that you were involved in a club. Put down what leadership you did. If there was an activity, if we raised money for a particular group, if we had a cultural night or cultural exchange, if we had a voter registration drive, even though we couldn't vote ourselves, we went into our community and registered the voters. These are the kinds of things you want to put down. And then, of course, the school clubs in which you're involved. If you're in student council, the years you were involved in it, the positions you held. And also, did you do things that were not necessarily club-based, but may have been 1 or 2 time activities? For example, I remember when I was in high school, my sophomore and my senior year, I headed the blood drive with the blood bank in my high school, because in California at that point, 16-year-olds could donate blood with parental. High schools was a very big thing. And as it turned out, I was actually too young. One of the years I led the blood drive, but nonetheless, I was still a leader of it. So that was something that I talked about. And I didn't do it because I wanted to put it on my resume. I did it because I thought it was important. Did you do something special like hike the Himalayan trail one summer between your sophomore and junior years? Put that down. Also, did you study jazz trumpet for 5 years? What honors and awards have you won? These are all the sort of things that you want to put onto your resume. And right now it may sound overwhelming and me asking, oh my God, Mr. Derek, how do I arrange all that? That's a lot of stuff. Don't worry. You write it down and we'll help you give it shape and form, right? Because it also, the order in which they appear may depend on the college to which you're applying and the major to which you're applying. So for example, if you're applying to, some of you may know about combined undergraduate, graduate medical programs. Well, those are very competitive and they're really looking for evidence of having some experience already in that area. So in which case your resume is going to emphasize the internship you had. I had a student who not only witnessed a brain surgery, he was standing next to a surgeon during the brain surgery. And when that person came out of brain surgery and could walk again for the first time, he was standing next to him. And we'd been working together for 2 months before he kind of casually mentioned that. And I was like, what? That is the kind of thing we write about. That goes on your resume. So again, put everything down and we'll help you give it shape, right? Because that's a very unique experience. And he wanted to be, a neurosurgeon. So you think that might be important, right? So again, keep that in mind. And then many of you have never had an interview. Some of you have been fortunate enough that you haven't had to have a job during school. I was not that person. I had a job during high school, which means that by the time I had my college interviews, I in fact had gone on job interviews, or I had an interview of some sort. And I also applied for, and I also was in public speaking, which sometimes there was an interview section to it. Some of you have never had that experience where someone has said, so tell me about you. Or you did this thing, tell me more about that. Do not worry, do not freak out. Again, we have what I've done with a number of students, I've given them a chance to practice those skills. Well, I will come in as a mock interviewer, and I'll actually ask you questions that I believe may be posed to you during the course of a college interview. And sometimes I will throw things in not to purposely make you make a mistake, but to test you on how well you can talk about your own story. And one of the things that I will emphasize now that I emphasize with my students is you want to be the best version of yourself, but you still want to be yourself. So you may notice Mr. Derek is a little gregarious, right? If that's not who you are, don't try to be that person in an interview. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that, and I'll give you a chance to practice and to go over it, and I'll give you feedback. And oftentimes I've done 2 or 3 interviews with people, or if there's a particular school for which they're applying, they want to do an interview, then I will ask them, I will do my own research, and I'll come in and ask you questions based on that research I've done. Here's something else to think about with college interviews. Particularly if you are interviewing in your local community. If you're interviewing in your local community, you are likely to be interviewing with an alum or alumni of that university. This is someone who is volunteering her time to talk to undergraduates to go to the university she attended 25 years ago. That means her experience there was very special to her, that she is taking time out of her life as a lawyer on a Sunday afternoon to interview students in her community to possibly go to the school for which she is still volunteering 25 years later. If you walk in and you have not thought about that school and you have not thought about why you want to go there, you are almost insulting that person by saying, yes, I want to go to your school. So think about the fact that the person with whom you're interviewing has a very special connection to that school. And if you know nothing about that school, that is going to resonate with them. I had a conversation with someone with whom I went to college. I went to Brown, and she does interviews with people applying to Brown. Kim went to Brown. Both of her brothers went to Brown. Her father went to Brown. Her uncle went to Brown. Now, if she's interviewing a student who's never thought about Brown, she's going to take that a little personally. She doesn't mean to, but it's going to mean something to her when somebody comes in and wants to go to a place that she has a lot of meaning attached to, and you as a student haven't even bothered to find out who the university president is, what the core curriculum is at Brown. Does Brown have a core curriculum? What does it mean to be part of the Brown curriculum? What is the Brown community like? If you can't answer any of those questions, then imagine how someone who's given her life through 2 generations of her family is going to feel about recommending you to that school. Now let's talk about recommendation letters. We all know the teachers who are very popular, and that is the person we all go to ask to write a letter of recommendation. That might be okay, but keep in mind some of those teachers who may not be necessarily inundated by a lot of students, because that one teacher can only say this person's really great so many times. So more importantly than that, choose someone, at least if it's a teacher, who can write well. And I have to admit, as someone who's done teaching, not all of us are necessarily great writers. So that if you've gotten comments and feedback in class, usually it's not an English teacher that's the problem with, right? But you've gotten comments on papers or in assignments, and even in your experience, you go, oh, that really wasn't that well written, or I didn't know what that person meant. This is not the person to write your letter of recommendation, because you want the person writing your letter of recommendation to be able to communicate clearly something about you, particularly that person's a teacher. Now, say it's a civic leader or a minister, right? Then you're going to ask that person to write about you. And then in the case of the teacher, and your minister or your civic leader. Help them write something about you. To wit, takes a while for my screen to change over. Mr. Amaker, when I took your class, you may recall that I took an extra research project on Elizabethan theater, or conducted an extra research project on Elizabethan theater as part of our Hamlet studies. So in that case, you're reminding the teacher that, oh yes, Susan took an extra step to do extra work in this area in my class, and she did a very good job at it. Or Mr. Boudreau, one activity I'd appreciate you mentioning is the work I did on the blood drive at school. That year, we had a 20% increase in participation, as you may recall. Or Ms. James, if you could speak to my organizing a leadership, if you could speak to my organizing and leading a study group for our A-Push exam, I believe that would really be helpful to my application. Because think about the number of students for whom your teachers are writing recommendations. It is up to you to remind that student, remind that teacher or that civic leader why and what you've done that is individual, so that when they write that letter, they aren't just saying, oh yes, Jordan was a very good student in my class. They will speak specifically to an example of that, and that's going to make you stand out even more. I did have one student a couple of years ago said, I want to ask my minister to write a letter, but English isn't his first language. What can I do? And I said, well, can that person speak to you about very specific experiences and very sincerely? And he said, yes, I think he can. I said, well, do this. Ask him to write a letter and then say, and if you're concerned about the grammar or the spelling or the punctuation, please write the letter. And if you don't mind, I can ask my tutor at Excel or my English teacher just to look it over. But you know this about me, and it's very important to me, and I'd be honored if you wrote this. And notice how the language I'm using doesn't put that person down for their English ability. It is all about you can say something about me that no one else can, and that the other things are just small things that can be dealt with. But I want your voice, and that really is critical. All right. That's all I have to say right now about those, and of course I'll be around for other questions. Now I believe I'm handing it.
Oh, I just want to interject one thing about the letter recommendation for students. It would be helpful to talk to your school counselor also about which teachers might be a good fit to write a letter. As a counselor, I know which teachers may write a more canned letter where it's the same for every student. They're kind of just changing the name. So, for instance, if you're a computer science major, I might say, well, I might know the computer science teacher may not write the best letter, maybe steer you towards a math teacher who might write a better letter for you. So this is where your counselor can help, because we know the writing styles of the teachers as well.
That is excellent advice. Thank you, Ms. Allen. The other thing I was going to say is, if you're concerned that a teacher or your recommender might need help remembering deadlines, particularly those who are not teachers, their teachers are more familiar with it. So you may say, Mr. Clint, I'll check back in with you and pick a date, a week, 10 days out from deadline, just to see if you have any more questions. And that 10 days out is a good time to remind them, saying, I'm seeing if you have any more questions, because I know the letter is due in such and such date. And always tell your recommenders what the deadline is and the way in which they need to submit that letter. Right? Great. Perfect. And that'll be on the application.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So we'll shortly transition into talking about scholarships and financial aid. I've already gotten some questions about that, but before we do so, as we're kind of talking about all of the other aspects of the college application, the applying for, the setting up the resumes, the interviews, the recommendation letters, I'd just like to briefly introduce kind of the newest addition to our college counseling team, Mr. Clint Miller, who has a lot of experience, with college counseling in general, but also especially with Ivy League colleges. So before we transition over to the scholarship and financial aid, I'd like to just briefly offer Mr. Clint just a chance to speak more about his story, and also just some general advice about preparing all of the aspects of the college application that we've discussed so far.
Yeah, I'd like to speak a little bit to the competitiveness of it, of the process. For me, I went to both Yale and Harvard, and I felt that at both schools, getting into them was harder than anything I did at either school. So getting into Yale was much harder than anything I did at Yale. Getting into Harvard was much harder than anything I did at Harvard. And it's only gotten more competitive since then. And all my students are facing a very competitive situation. Even if it's not the elite schools, it's almost for every school now, it's competitive. And I want the students to know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And my students always, at the end of this process, you have the reverse situation, where if you do the process right, the universities will compete for you at the end of the process, because they all want you. They're going to be trying to tell you all the different reasons you should go to this university over this university. So you need to keep in mind, if you do this correctly, it's not always you having to compete against your peers. And at the very end of this process, if you do it right, the universities will begin to compete for you. So now let me tell you a little bit about my story, because I think it'll give you some tips that will help. And this will help anybody, not just for the elite universities, but what I'm going to say is applicable very much to the elite schools. I tutored students at both Yale and Harvard. So I tutored students that were attending those schools, and a lot of my students had some writing difficulties, and I would help them turn their writing around. I used a lot of different tips and tricks, basically English teaching kind of tricks to help their writing. And I was really pleased with helping them, change their writing, and really that I could change a C student to an A student. And it was a lot of these students were almost about to, if their writing didn't improve, they would have gotten sent out of Harvard, or they would have had to take a gap year. So by helping them improve, I helped them pretty much graduate because they were allowed to stay. But the tips that I've been teaching students to help them get in are slightly different than this. And the way that I learned these tips, after Harvard, I moved to China, and I lived in China for about 5 years. And I worked as a teacher and a college counselor, and later a principal. And I had many students that I was very invested in. When you're a teacher, you just get students that you really like and you want them to succeed. And I was noticing that some of my students, it felt to me like they should have succeeded, and it was harder for them, and that the universities were making it harder for them, that the universities, in my opinion, were discriminating against them. Now, the universities don't think that they're doing this, and they have a different side of this argument, and they've won many of the Supreme Court cases that allow them to keep doing this. But in my opinion, they are discriminating against many types of students. And I've got several, when I looked into these cases, I discovered several things that help all students get through this process. Now, for my Chinese students in particular, they were low personality scores. And if you study the admissions court cases in the Supreme Court, it revolves around this. Asian students and many other students too, they will be given lower personality scores in the rankings process. And it felt like there was nothing they could do. It's almost a prejudicial situation, that how can you stop somebody from giving you low personality scores? Even in some of my students where I could verify, these students had great personalities, top notch. And I mean, I just knew in my heart that these were good students. So there was no reason that they should be getting low personality scores, but sometimes they would. So what is the trick that helps all students get past this problem? What I discovered was it wasn't exactly the techniques of that you might learn in academic English writing. What helps me the most is to think about some other experiences that I've had in screenwriting. As a screenwriter, I have dealt with producers in multiple countries, in China and in America and India. And I've worked with a lot of different scripts, and I've worked as a ghostwriter and also writing my own scripts and working with a lot of producers and in many different fields. And there's one rule that stays true no matter what field you're in, what style of script, what country you're in. Every single producer wants to see a script where the main character undergoes a fundamental change. And at the beginning of the script, you're introduced to a main character, and by the end of the script, there's something different about that main character. And so what I help my students do is think about their lives as if it's a movie, and that they're the main characters of their own lives. And how can you tell this story and show some sort of fundamental change? And when my students do that the correct way with that formula, it hugely boosts their personality scores, and they get in that enviable position where now they're no longer competing with other students for schools. It's the schools competing for them. And that's the situation we want all of you to be in. So there's ways that you can use these techniques for any path that you want. So it's not just for elite schools, but these work really well for elite schools. But I think everyone should be thinking about it no matter what path that you're on, because thinking about some way to tell your story where you can show how you've changed is going to be very impactful for you. Now, the other thing that I really want every student to pay close attention to is, what are your goals? What are your goals in life? What do you want to go to university for? And if you got your dreams, if you got accepted into your dream university, what would you do the moment that you graduated? If everything worked, what are your big dreams? So you really need to think of some big ambitious dreams that are going to make you stand out to those schools and make those schools want to have you as an alumni. And then you need to be able to communicate those dreams in a way that's memorable, in a way that shows some element of change, as if you're almost writing a screenplay about your life, as if you're the main character of your life. So, and with that in mind, I know that this is a stressful time, and like I said, you're competing against all your peers, but it can really be fun. And when you start thinking about it in terms of this is your life, and this is a movie about your life, and you're thinking about what are your motivations and what do you really want to do, and what are the big picture things that you want to do in the world, it can be a very fun process, and you can find out more about yourself and become more competitive at the same time. And then in the end, you'll find yourself in that great position where you're no longer competing, it's them competing for you.
Thank you so much. No, I appreciate that. Thank you again for your advice, and thank you to everybody thus far who's given us advice about these, varied aspects of the college application that can be quite stressful, but I, at least at the very least, thinking about the essay, find them to be the most enjoyable part. So happy to help with that particular aspect. Among all aspects of the college application if you decide to sign up with us and start working with us. So now that we've kind of talked about, preparing for college, next is going to be, we'll transition over to Miss Alice, who will kind of prepare us for how to pay for college, financial aid, scholarships, the monetary side of things. So Alice, whenever you're ready.
Hi, good afternoon. So I want to start by saying to parents and students, before or when you start the college process, have a conversation as a family and be transparent about what you can afford for your student. So this will save you a lot of tears in April and May when the decision time comes. Sometimes students might have unrealistic expectations of what their parents can provide for them. So that's just something I like to tell families from the very get-go. So I want to start by talking about financial aid first. The FAFSA is the biggest area for federal monies. So it stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, and it comprises grants, and I have their scholarships, which I'll talk about in a second, loans, work study. In the slide, you'll see some amounts that I have with each of the areas. So what the FAFSA will provide for need-based, it's on a need-based basis for families. The federal Pell Grant is, you'll see their numbers based on last year, and you don't have to pay a Pell Grant back. It is money given to you for college. There are different types of loans, subsidized versus unsubsidized. A subsidized loan is the interest is paid while the student is attending school, so monies is not being accrued at that time. In comparison with an unsubsidized loan, the second it is distributed to your college financial aid office, they start tacking on that interest. So that's something to be, wary of, or I guess, knowledgeable about. They also provide the Parent Plus loan, and this is a loan that is in the parent name, not the student's name. So the financial responsibility is on the parents. Work study opportunities, that is also part of FAFSA. It's need-based. So the student may be eligible to work part-time, whether it's 10 hours, 15 hours, it's no more than 20 at the college. And all the money that they work, or all the hours that they work towards will go towards their tuition and other campus needs. The FAFSA opens on October 1st of a student's senior year. You can apply with the previous year's tax information, and now the FAFSA will have a direct link to the IRS website. So when you complete your taxes for the current year that the student is going to be going to school, or the year previous, if that makes sense, it will automatically update for you. So that's a nice feature. Now, I did say scholarships. Some colleges want to see that families are exhausting every avenue to receive monies for school. So they will tie in sometimes their merit-based scholarships saying, if you don't apply for FAFSA, we're not going to grant you our merit-based scholarships. So that's why I tell families that say, well, I don't need to apply for the FAFSA because we won't qualify. But we encourage everyone to apply because you never know. Now, colleges also, some of the elite colleges, they understand that schools are expensive and they don't want to see students saddled with a lot of debt coming out of college. So Brown, for instance, offers what's called the Brown Promise. They will look at the family's expected financial contribution. It's called the EFC. And they will then say, if a student can afford this amount, then the rest of the monies for tuition will bundle into merit-based scholarships, and they won't even offer a loan package. So they want to try to, again, not saddle students with debt. Columbia offers the same type of situation as well. Okay, the next slide. Jordan, please. The Css Profile is another application that some more elite colleges will ask for. Over 400 colleges and scholarship programs use the Css Profile, and there is a fee for this. It's $25 application fee, and you'll see that there's additional amount for every school that you use. Now, the profile is more invasive. They will factor into they'll take into consideration other factors, such as, you know, if there's medical bills or if there's spousal support or child support you have to pay. So they look at everything a little more intensively and will, you know, make a decision on your expected family contribution without just the FAFSA. The opening date is the same as the FAFSA. It's October 1st, and you can submit at least 2 weeks before the earliest deadline. Now, keep in mind with financial aid and scholarship and loans, if you are planning to attend a school that's $60,000 a year and taking out that much in loans, and I have seen this happen, and you come out of college owing $240,000, but you're going into a field like education, for instance, which is what I'm in, but it might not start at the most lucrative salary. It may take you a long time to pay those loans off. So be smart and be, you know, realistic about what you want to handle and take on after your college years, because that's something to think about that not all students, you know, consider when they're senior in high school. Okay, the next slide, Jordan. All right, scholarships is a big topic, and I have one slide, but I kind of narrowed it down a little bit. So the most amount of monies will come directly from the college itself. When you apply, sometimes the colleges have an automatic, when you apply for admissions, you're automatically applying for their incoming freshman scholarships. Keeman mentioned earlier, USC has a separate scholarship application. So that's something you're gonna have to be careful and pay attention to if there's a separate scholarship application for incoming freshmen at the colleges. Also, if you're applying to honors colleges, a lot of honors colleges will offer scholarships as well. So that's something to consider if you're a contender. For the high school scholarships, CCSD does a great job of consolidating all the scholarships that they receive through the state level, national level, local level. And on their website, there is a link to scholarships. They will list all the scholarships that are available for the year. They put in order by month, so it makes it very easy. You just have to click on it. It tells you what exactly the parameters are of that scholarship, and you can apply. I've seen so many of these go, you know, they might get a handful of students that apply, and it's such a shame because this is free money that you don't have to pay scholarship monies back. And you can use it towards education. You can use it towards books sometimes. You can use it towards room and board. So that's something to consider. The other part of the CCSD scholarships is the Public Education Foundation. And it's not just for, I should say, Clark County School District students. So public or private schools, I often tell my students to go to the CCSD website. But the Public Education Foundation offers numerous scholarships. And what's even better is they offer scholarships based on the schools that you are attending. So there's tons of scholarships for students that go to Desert Oasis or Palo Verde or Clark. And it's specific, and it really takes, you know, time and diligence to apply, but the more you apply, the better your chances are. If you apply to 2 scholarships, these type of scholarships, chances are you might not receive either. If you apply to 10, you might receive 1, which could be $1,000, $2,000. Every bit helps, but it does take work. And if you're organized, meaning if you have your educational information in front of you, like you have your resume, you have letters of recommendations, you have an essay, you have your GPA class rank, those are all the things that scholarships ask for. And if that's at your fingertips, it makes applying to these much easier. A lot of you probably are aware of the Millennium Scholarship. It's for Nevada colleges. But students that go away to school, you can also use the funds for summer school. So if you want to take a class in the summer to, I don't know, get ahead or, take a core class, you definitely can. And I listed the parameters for the Millennium Scholarship below. There's no application, it's automatic. The registrar's office at your high school will send information to the state, which then will send information to the colleges. So you can just follow up with your college financial aid office from there. In addition to all of the scholarships from high schools and colleges are private companies. So there are so many out there. I listed just a couple of well-known ones, but I want to say never pay for a scholarship. The point is you're trying to receive free monies. So even if, like I said, it's $1, think about a company that's offering scholarships for $1. If 1 million students pay $1, that company is getting $1 million at your expense, when other companies will just give you money for free. So places to ask, check with your parent's employer. If you work, Chick-fil-A offers a scholarship if you work there. If you volunteer, Big Brothers and Big Sisters, they offer a scholarship that you can apply for. The elementary school, there's an elementary school in Henderson that offers a scholarship. If you went to that elementary school, you can apply for that scholarship. So again, there's a lot of things. If you're left-handed, there's left-handed. If you're tall, if you're short. So it just takes a little bit of research that, and some dedication. I know parents a lot of times will help their students try to locate some of these scholarships as well, which can be helpful. Another thing I want to say is if you have the package from the college and you really want to go to that college, I had a student years ago that asked and called the financial aid office and said, this is my #1 school, I've been admitted, but I just need a little more help. And they actually gave it to the student. And the student called themselves, not the parent, which I think showed some initiative on that student's part. Now, will that always happen? No, but it's worth a shot if you need a little bit extra help, or they can maybe give you an avenue to find additional resources. It does take time and dedication. So again, if you apply to all your colleges and get that part done with, sometime in the first semester, continue working on applying for scholarships and really focus on that all the way in the spring. We had scholarships that were available even in May. There's some I've seen in June that students could apply for and use for this coming school year. So I know that's kind of a quick overview of scholarships and financial aid, but I'll be around for questions as well. I'd now like to pass it to Hannah, who's going to talk about her current college experience.
Hi, my name is Hannah, and I'll be attending Johns Hopkins University in the fall. And my intended major is either public health or biology. So as you're starting out your college application process, my first advice is plan out your time ahead to prevent procrastination or missing deadlines. Especially for me, last year, we were applying in the midst of COVID. So it was really easy to get unmotivated, or I had some friends that they procrastinated so much to the last minute that they were doing all their essays the night before, or they even missed deadlines. So the Excel program, the college counseling program at Excel, they really help you with that. But then also you want to do it for yourself just to prevent any procrastination or missing deadlines. And so for me, when I was starting out my college application process, I really wanted to apply to somewhere, early decision. I liked the idea of committing to a school and being able to find out earlier if I got accepted. And the downside of that is that you don't get to know how much financial aid you get. So that's something you have to talk to with your parents. But so some of the reasons why I decided to apply to Johns Hopkins early decision was the pre-med program and research opportunities. That's something that I really wanted to get out of my college experience. And I really like the Baltimore location, and conveniently I had family there, which is really nice. And so I also like the faculty and community. I felt like overall it fit me and like what I wanted out of college. And so when I was deciding which college I wanted to apply to early decision, I was really like conflicted because I was scared of what's it called? I was scared of wasting my early decision on a college that I knew I really loved, but it had a really low acceptance rate. It was really selective. I knew that I had to have really good SAT, ACT scores, and I knew that there would be other students with way more volunteer and research hours than me. So that really intimidated me. And I even considered going to applying early decision to another college that I knew I liked, but I felt didn't fit me as much as Johns Hopkins did. So my biggest advice to everyone who's starting this process is don't let that kind of stuff intimidate you. If you find a college that you really feel like you'd be happy in after you've done all your research, that you'd be able to like thrive in and like fit you really well, then just go for it. Because the early decision application is really good opportunity to boost your acceptance rate. And so I wouldn't, even if you don't get in, I think like even if you do your best, that's all that matters. So just like give it all you got. That's my final advice. And
Awesome.
I'm going to be introducing the next speaker. She's also a student. Her name is Jessica.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Jessica, and I am going to go to Columbia University in the fall as part of the class 2025. My intended major is engineering. I applied as an earth and environmental engineering major, but I don't really know if I'm going to say this major, so that's why I just said engineering as my major. I chose Columbia over a couple other schools, including MIT, Caltech, and Case Western. I also applied for 3 of the UCs, USC and Northeastern, although I did withdraw my application, so that's why you don't see them on this list. My biggest piece of advice for the college admissions cycle is to be very unapologetically yourself. And I just think it's very important because I caught myself and a lot of my friends did the same thing. We all wanted to mold ourselves into this person that we thought a college would want to see. And we were so convinced that that was the type of persona that would get accepted into these top colleges that we kind of found ourselves losing ourselves when we're writing our essays, when we're constructing our basically our narrative in the college application process. But I think that the best way to go through this process is to be very much yourself, to let your personality show through. A lot of our counselors today have already said that, but definitely let those like weird, even those like quirky parts, the not so great parts of yourself, just not so perfect parts of yourself show through, because that's really what makes you a really interesting applicant. And that's why I also say, like, don't stress yourself out so much, not just during the college application cycle when you're comparing yourself with other people. You feel a lot of pressure, and colleges know that. Your teachers, everyone, they all know that. They're all willing to help you out. So definitely find yourself those mentors that can help you guide you along the way. And I mean, the fact that you're at this webinar already tells me that you do take college seriously, but do not stress yourself out over college. And that kind of in like a broader sense, not just college applications, but even when you're going through like finding your extracurriculars or your passion projects, it's okay to fail, because a lot of the times, like through my college or my high school experience, at least, I tried out a lot of different extracurriculars. I tried out a lot of essay topics. You know, you try a lot of stuff and it fails all the time. Like I did research and it didn't always work, or you might run for student body president, something like that. You might fail. It's okay, because that's something you can also include in your application. Colleges know that students aren't perfect, and colleges know that students will fail. So if you put that as part of your application and mention personal growth or mention how it really taught you something, I think that could actually be a definite plus to your application.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you again to Hannah and Jessica for speaking and offering their experiences about this most recent application cycle, and also just for all of our past speakers as well, members of our college counseling team. I greatly appreciate it. And I'm going to say just one more quick thing, and then we'll break off to the Q&A section. Won't take more than a minute. So just want to let you know, we're starting to ramp up and starting to really promote our Excel Pathways program, which is more college counseling in terms of like a long-term process of, stepping into high school in 9th grade and wondering like, what are the extracurricular activities that I should be taking to like all 4 years of high school? What, projects should I be pursuing? Where should I volunteer? Any questions you might have, we're offering it is more of kind of like a long-term guidance. So if, for many of you, obviously you're here because this upcoming year you'll be applying for college, but if you know somebody, if you have a younger sibling or anybody who might be preparing or, doing freshman year of high school, entering into sophomore year, we are able to kind of do this long-term mentorship that will oftentimes kind of allow you to build up that resume, build up that list of experiences that you will be able to use and really profit off of as soon as you, reach senior year and begin to apply for college. So, we've seen time and time again, we've seen the occasional student who comes up and is wondering, it's the summer before they have to apply for college. And they wonder, like, maybe I should have done more extracurricular activities or volunteering or things like that. They feel like there might be a gap in their resume. And if you sign up with us early, freshman year, sophomore year, we can help you fill those gaps in the resume prior to your senior year when you officially apply for college. So here's some basic details here. If you'd like, we also have the email, and then we have the telephone number listed down below. That'll be that information will also be repeated during our Q&A slide. So you'll be able to chance to record that or write that down later on. Which, speaking of, let's go ahead and transition over. For those of you who stuck around, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being with us and listening to our advice and guidance for you all. And want to just open it up now for general questions. So if you have questions, you're either welcome to message me privately, or you can just drop them in the chat, just kind of the general chat area, and all of us would be able to assist you in some regard. So feel free to take the time if you have any specific questions for us. Feel free to type them in the chat and let us know. Yes, Mr. Derek, go ahead. Sorry, I saw the hand. Yeah.
I actually had a question for Ms. Alice.
Oh.
When Hannah was speaking about choosing her college, she mentioned something about, and talk to your parents as well about money and financial aid and funds that are available. I wondered if you could just speak briefly, in case there are any parents listening who may have younger students, and there still might be some chance, about the tax-deferred college savings account, if you know anything about that.
Well, I mean, like you're talking about like the 529 plans and things like that. Yes. So there are a lot of different plans out there. Now, there's differing opinions, I think, on it as well. For instance, I have a 529 set up for my own kids. And so the students will, my kids can use that money towards any college that they choose. And I picked the Utah plan. I don't know why, but I just happened to pick that plan. And so they can use that money, but they are taxed on it. So sometimes the advice is for parents to set up a fund for their kids in either their name or a grandparent's name. It's kind of as a gift that they can give. I don't want to give too much tax information because that's not my area of expertise per se, but I do think those plans are helpful to start off early because it's money that you're not even aware that you're putting aside, and then they'll have these funds later on. So I do think that they're a great thing. Some states do offer a promise where you can lock in a certain college tuition at a certain rate, so that when the student matures and gets to the senior year and they go to college that final year or the year after, they have to go to that state and use the funds for that, any college in that particular state, but they've locked in a tuition rate that's lower than what it is perhaps now. So that's something to look at as well.
Thank you so much. I got a message directed to me that I'd like to open up to the group, just asking for more information about like a passion project to pursue during your 4 years of high school. I can maybe briefly kind of start off, and then if anybody else would like to jump in after that, you're more than welcome to. But essentially, the idea is going to be just to proving this is kind of part of your demonstrated interest in whatever it is your particular field of study, or it could be also kind of unrelated and is simply just this kind of research project, or it could be, when we say research project, it could be something as simple as like shadowing a doctor. It could also be something like conducting your own scientific experiment for inclusion in science fair. But it could also be, when we talk about research, it could also be more of the liberal arts humanities side of things, of writing an article for publication somewhere, or entering essay contests, or applying for these things that aren't necessarily a part of a extracurricular activity, like along with a team or an organization, but is something that you just independently want to pursue outside of school, outside of an organization, just to not only, obviously, it's something that you're interested in, but also to prove to your college that you're dedicated to learning and the pursuit of knowledge outside of class. But that's kind of a basic overview. I was kind of wondering if anybody else would like to offer some other pointers of like what a passion project looks like, essentially.
Yeah, I can say something real quick.
Sure.
So generally, like when you apply to college, you don't necessarily have to know what your major is, and it won't really affect you in that, they don't think like, this student doesn't know what he wants to do, so he must not be like, dedicated type student, because most students change their majors when they get to college. But it does help to have some type of kind of an intellectual interest or some cause or something that you believe in, so that when you do your passion project, it helps to have that be related towards what you're interested in. It doesn't necessarily have to be a specific major, although if you already know you want to do pre-med or engineering or law or whatever, then it's like, if you want to do like public policy or something like that, then it helps to work in a congressional election, or to try to volunteer for something, some kind of a candidate's campaign. If you want to do medicine, yes, it's probably better to shadow a doctor, do some research working on a science project. But even if you don't know your major, at least have an idea of some kind of an intellectual interest or some passion or some cause in life that you care about. Could be about like, teen depression problems or whatever it is. And then do your research and then find organizations that deal with that and really volunteer and care about it and put your heart into it, so the colleges can see that you step out to do something beyond what a normal student would do to pursue it.
Can I just talk about that for 1 second too? And an example is a couple of my students during the pandemic realized that a lot of their friends were depressed, and that's something that Keeman had brought up. So they even created something as simple as Ask 5 campaign. So on social media, ask 5 people and how they're doing today. And that's it. And it was a campaign that spread, I saw through social media. And then they painted rocks with inspirational words and left them all around Las Vegas. And recently it was approved through legislation that students should have 3 mental health days that won't affect or go against their attendance at their schools. So something like that was, started pretty simple, has really grown in such a short amount of time. And using the social media was smart because it was an easy way to get the word out.
And it looks really good on your college application.
Absolutely.
All of my students that have had passion projects, it always helps them so much. So, and I would always encourage students, if you can't think of one, work with a coach and try to find something, because it just really helps. And just from my own personal experience, even if it's not something in your own major or the thing that you're focusing on, both of my when I was applying to Yale, I had been working on an opera at the time, but this isn't related to my major at all. But it just came up in my interview, and as soon as the interviewer found out about that, he remembered me, and that was the thing that made him remember me. Same with Harvard. It was a separate passion project. It was about for me, I was studying Middle English, which is like the transition period between Old English and the current. And I just wrote up a little bit about what I'd been doing in my own studies. And just writing something like that goes a long way. So if you just show that you have a passion, it makes you memorable. It does a lot for you. So I can't say enough about trying to find a passion in a passion project.
Thank you. Yeah, just to, again, briefly kind of plug the Pathways program. Part of the reason we were kind of trying to set that up is so, as people have indicated, if you're just unsure of like what would be a good project, like maybe you have an interest, but you don't know how to apply it into like a actual tangible product, writing an article or petitioning the local government or whatever it is that you're trying to do. If you're looking for that structure or for that guidance, part of the reason we're doing the Pathways program is so if you're completely lost or unsure where to start, or maybe you just need somebody to help you with like managing deadlines and make sure you're focused and progressing, then that's kind of something that we're starting to offer as well here. We obviously, as you can kind of tell through our various kind of biographies and the information we've shared with you, we have a lot of experience doing things outside of college counseling, and we can help you in that regard. I'm going to transition briefly, if that's okay, to another question that we just had. Let me just pull it up real quick. The next question we have here is, what is the best way to find out like which college culture would be the best fit for a student's personality? Kind of just figuring out more less of the name brand kind of stuff and more of the like what actual like culture or personality does a college have, and how would you begin kind of assessing that? So I'll open it up if anybody has any guidance or advice about that.
I would say like you could start with online research and probably create a list of like certain things you want in your college and you don't want, like geographic location, area, like things like that, and make like a list of those. And then there's resources out there. You can find books like the FIS Guide or books that kind of give a background about what each college's sort of vibe is like. And then you got to kind of do your own research. I mean, like a lot of the information is available online, so you can kind of look that up. Obviously, visiting the college will help, talking to students who attended that college and finding out what the college environment is like. And that you can do if you kind of follow them on social media, then, reach out to a few, ask about the college and then learn more information about that. But mostly you're going to have to kind of do your own research into the different colleges, depending on, your numbers and where you think which you can get into, where the colleges are located, what you want out of college, and just go ahead and research that online, and we can help you with that.
Absolutely. I know that also, and correct me if I'm wrong, my brain is blanking at the moment. I think it's either the U.S. News or Princeton Review will oftentimes have like annual lists of, for example, like the most politically progressive colleges, or like have those like certain criteria, or like the most like LGBTQ friendly colleges, or many different kind of lists or criteria. And that might not be the most comprehensive, but it should at least be an introduction if you're totally unsure of where to start. They do offer like these very kind of detailed lists depending on many different sort of like skills or interests that you're pursuing. That's absolutely key. Hannah, I see. Yeah, go ahead if you want to jump in. Go for it.
Yeah, something that really helped me is like signing up for the webinars. There's like online webinars that you can go to, and like you get to like talk with students who are already there, and because it's in like smaller groups, you get to like talk one-on-one, and that helps a lot.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, and again, part of the like wanting to maybe go on virtual campus tours or campus tours in general, now that things are kind of starting to open up again, part of that is also going to be just seeing firsthand the kind of culture, the kind of personality that college carries. So another reason, maybe if you can, take a trip either virtually or literally sometime this summer. Let's see. If there's nothing else, then I can move on to the next question and final question I have so far. And that is essentially like, let's say, for example, a student has no idea kind of like what their career interest is or their aspiration is, and they're unsure of where to start. Like, is there any particular kind of advice that you might give? I'll just briefly say something, and then if anybody else kind of has advice for sharing, like let's say they're a freshman and they have no idea what they want to major in or ultimately what their job is going to be, kind of how to assess that. I would just briefly say, as somebody who myself and many of my friends nowadays are constantly kind of gravitating or wavering between jobs, switching between jobs, two things would just be to say, like, what are their favorite classes? What are their favorite things to do in class? So maybe starting identifying those soft skills, for example, of like, maybe they really love giving public presentations, but also think about the subject area that they're interested in. And then also take into consideration kind of the causes or their passions that they definitely have demonstrated interest in outside of their extracurricular activities in their school. So for example, if they're really interested in advocating for mental health, maybe they're interested in pursuing becoming a counselor or a therapist, think about kind of what their interests are. And then you can maybe start bridging those interests and those passions with some like definable careers that might be able to allow them to exhibit said passions. But that's, again, a broad overview. I'm sure some people might have some more specific advice or just other advice to give. So I'll open it up.
I have two pieces of advice. My first piece of advice is don't worry about it. You're 17 years old and you think you're an adult. You're not. It's okay. What will happen for a lot of people, they will major something in college. They will work in that for a few years after college. And at 30 will say, that's not what makes me happy. I want to do this other thing. 30 is not that old. It sounds that old to you guys. It's not. At 30 is not too old to go back to graduate school and do something else. The most important thing is that you pick a college that you're going to have an experience that's going to satisfy you, that's going to give you a good education, and that's going to give you the foundations to be an independent thinker and to know what kind of goals you want to set for yourself. So that if you major in biology and at 30 you go, I no longer want to be a biologist, I want to go study Sanskrit. That's okay. That's okay. Most important thing is also that in those intervening years, don't get behind your student loans so that when you decide at 30 you want to go study Sanskrit, you can get loans to go to graduate school to do that, or you won't be saddled with debt, right? The other half of that is when choosing, this is sort of dovetailing what Jordan was saying. If there's something that interests you, find out how you can make a career out of it. So say that you're the person in your group at high school who always plans the party. And you're like, there's no way I can make money at that. I don't know if you know this, but every hotel and resort, and you happen to be in Las Vegas, has someone who plans conventions and weddings and people's birthday parties and big bachelor parties and bachelorette parties or celebration parties when the team wins or when some reunion happens for some college fraternity. There's somebody on staff at those casinos who handles that. You can support yourself as a party planner. So don't be afraid to say, you know, I kind of like this thing. How can I turn this into a career? One of my friends, her daughter is in college right now, and she was a songwriter. She started writing songs in high school. She won a couple of local contests as a singer-songwriter at open mic nights. And her mother said, okay, you can study music and I'll pay for that. But you also have to study music engineering at the same time. That way, while you're learning to be a performer, you will also have the technical skills, so you will always have a job, but you will have a job in an industry that you like. So that's the other thing what I was saying when Mr. George is talking about those soft skills. There is a way in which you can monetize that. You may not do exactly what you want, but you can come pretty close if you're really creative. And that's why it's important to talk to people with life experiences as well.
100%. Anybody else?
What grade was the student who asked that question? Was it
I am unsure. If the person is listening right now and would like to offer that information, please let me know. But I'm not quite sure at the moment. Yeah. So
I mean, because if it's like an 8th grader or a 9th grader
Right.
wondering like that, then it would be like what you originally said, Jordan, is like try to figure out which subjects you find the most enjoyable.
Sure.
What do you find watching like on Netflix? Like what type of documentaries that you enjoy, and then
Right.
you know, just you can still explore when you're this young, and like your goal is just try to figure out something that you really really love, that you know that you enjoy, and that you wouldn't mind reading like 100-page books on it, and it won't be boring to you. Just you're still young enough to seek that out.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was going to maybe briefly offer an anecdote before we transition over into our next question and say, like, for example, my high school experience, I was always the kid where all of my friends would constantly ask me to look at their essays before they submitted it for English class or like any work of writing. They were like, Jordan knows grammar. Can Jordan look at the essay, et cetera, et cetera. And it got to a point where like, I love editing and I love looking at writing and helping with writing. But I also love money. So eventually, it got to a point where in high school and college, I would volunteer for helping my friends. And I just realized like, this is something I've been doing for a long time. I think it's time for me to like transition over into making a career. So again, kind of think about, again, as Mr. Derek was saying, like if you're the party planner all the time, think about monetizing that or whatever it is that you offer within your community or within your friend group. Think if you really enjoy doing it, think about transitioning that and maybe start building up a foundation for that to become a career of some kind. So the next question is, let me just pull it up, make sure I got it. is what is a good amount of colleges to apply to? Like, is there a limit? And I don't know if there's a hard and fast rule. There's definitely like a territory in which we're like, maybe stay away. But I was wondering if, people have specific anecdotes or experiences of maybe, students maybe biting off a bit more than they can chew in terms of the amount of colleges that they apply to.
Well, for me personally, I don't think it's necessarily about the amount of colleges, but you don't want to just be throwing out a bunch of applications just to like throw a bunch of darts on a board and hope one hits. Because each college you apply to, you're going to have to prove that they're the college for you. So if you apply to 15 colleges, that's that 15 times the amount of work for each college that you're going to have to put in. So I would keep the list within the range where you feel like you have the time, like with your busy senior schedule, first semester senior schedule, to seriously dedicate a lot of research for each college you apply to. So just think about it that way, like it's the amount of work you're willing to put in, because each college you apply to requires a lot of work. So I would say pick like a few reaches, a few dreams, a few targets, a couple safeties, maybe 10 around there or so. Like Clint, do you have any like thoughts about that? Like, does applying to tons of colleges, or is there like a certain number like you think from
this year and last year? Trying for a little bit more than usual is going to be helpful because of the unique circumstances.
Yeah.
But it's really for everybody's got a different goal and target on that, so it's personalized depending on the goals.
That it's also expensive. Application, the cost of applications is, can be anywhere from 40 to 80. So that's something to think about. And also sometimes we have students who apply to too many schools and they get into most of the schools that they apply to, but then it's an agonizing decision on which school to attend because they're applying just based on whether the name or their friends are going. And then it's such a tough decision for them to decide. So really apply to schools that you want to go to. Don't apply to 5 safety schools. There's not a need. If you're applying to the state schools as your safety schools, I ask students, if you got into UNR and UNLV, which one would you rather go to? And if they say for sure UNR, then why apply to UNLV? I mean, not knocking on UNLV, but you're saving that application fee and that time and energy spent on applying. So think about it in a smart way.
Absolutely. Yes, yeah, I completely agree with all the above. And again, we were kind of also hinting at it's maybe less about the amount and more about the diversity of the colleges that you choose in terms of as Mr. Kima was indicating, like the dream schools, the reach schools, kind of the target schools, and like the safety schools. You want to make sure that you at least have a healthy mix. At the end of the day, you want to make sure that you're at least going to be going to college and, applying to those safety schools, et cetera. So, you can apply to 12 schools, but if they're all Ivy League, it's going to be, a bit more of a risk than making sure that you at least have a healthy mix of schools that you feel fairly confident you'll get accepted in. So anyway, that might be my other 2 cents as well.
Mr. Jordan, there are only 8 Ivy Leagues.
I'm so sorry about that. Yes, if you have that and then one more thrown in there, I'm not sure. Anyway, then it's gonna be a bit of a risk, I guess. So anyway, just something to consider and keep in mind. Thank you for the fact check. I appreciate that. Let's see. That's it for the questions at the moment, unless anybody else has something they would like to ask. I'd also just say, oh, go ahead. No, please.
I was also going to say, for a number of people, from some of you already know that college is not going to be the end of your education. Some of you may know already, I want to be a college professor, which is going to entail getting a master's and a PhD later, if you know what that is. Some of you already know I'm going to go to medical school. So that also means if you don't get into this number one school you want to go to, do the best at the school you attend, because there'll be fewer people applying to graduate school. And the better you do as an undergraduate, the more choices you'll also have as a graduate student. And for some careers, that is more important than where you do your undergraduate work. One of our tutors was a young man who grew up in Las Vegas, did very well in school, went to UNLV because it was close, it was cheap, graduated UNLV with no debt, always knew he wanted to go in economics, got into Stanford for graduate school. So And graduate school, they usually will offer you money as a stipend as a teaching assistant. So he got into one of the best universities in the country with a UNLV education and walked in owing no money. In 4 years, he's going to walk out with a doctorate from Stanford. He is going to be in a very good position because he also worked very hard as an undergraduate. So also don't kick yourself if you don't get into that perfectly elite school, especially if that is not the end of your education.
Completely. Yeah, I mean, we can obviously speak more about that, but at the end of the day, you know, I think maybe the conception of certain like elite or Ivy League colleges is simply being admitted and having that name on your transcript or having that name on that particular name brand recognition as part of your degree is going to be enough to set you up for the rest of your life. And that's simply just not true anymore. If you go to an Ivy League, but you end up kind of just staying in your dorm room all day and not participating, not networking, not volunteering your services in terms of like extracurricular activities or organizations, you might not be in the same position in terms of like future career opportunities, et cetera, than someone who might not go to an Ivy League, but is constantly, you know, as Mr. Derek was saying, like working, hustling, like, you know, making those connections, volunteering their hours, being a part of various organizations. So just consider that as a possibility in terms of just, you know, if you don't get those Ivy League colleges, I know it can be hard or disappointing, but that doesn't mean you're still going to have an incredible, enriching experience no matter where you go. Let's see. Well, we are out of questions for now. I would be happy to kind of stick around just a little bit longer if anybody else has any particular questions. But again, as you can see right here, for those of you who are still attending, we do have not only our email, but also our phone number. So if you think of something later on, or perhaps maybe you have a more specific question related to your own personal circumstances, you can feel free to address us there. And then of course, as well, you're more than welcome to sign up for a session with us. That can give us a great opportunity for us to see your grades, get more information from you, and we can start tailor making a perfect college plan for you and help you prepare based on your expressed interests and your personalized desires in terms of, you know, what colleges you want to go to and what you want to do when you get there. So don't be afraid to reach out, let us know. But otherwise, I guess, unless there's anything else that people would like to add at the end as we start to wrap up, I will just say thank you all for attending. Again, thank you all for a wonderful webinar. And we hope to hear from you very, very soon. So thank you again. Good to go? Okay. Thank you all. I will stick around just to make sure we're good. Any last minute questions, but everybody else free to go. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday and the rest of your weekends. So.
Thank you.
Of course, thank you.
Bye, guys.